There's a revolution taking place right now. It's going on all around us in places that we work, and a lot of people aren't even aware that it's going on. The revolution I'm referring to is the remote working revolution. For those of you who have not heard of remote working before, perhaps you've heard the terms telecommuting or teleworker, referring to somebody who on occasion works from their house, or perhaps even in one of your workplaces, a mysterious person who seems to get work done, but you've never met in person and perhaps suspect that they don't even really exist. I'm one of those people, and I'm going to talk with you about that for a little bit. This has been a long time coming, and it's not just because we were waiting for the technology to catch up. In fact, the technology has been here for a while. So I want to start off with a quote from a remote programmer named Mountain Ghosts on Twitter. 1995, the information superhighway will mean anyone can do anything from anywhere. 2015, must be willing to relocate to San Francisco. This is actually an excerpt from a job posting for a San Francisco-based tech company that writes software specifically for the purpose of remote collaboration. Unfortunately, they still feel that employees need to be in San Francisco to be effective working at their organization. A lot of companies are starting to change their mind about that. And I want to start off with telling you a little bit about my remote working story. So, rewind back to 2011, I was working in Stillwater, Oklahoma at a drilling company. I left my job to start living the remote working dream, working for an IT consulting company that allowed remote workers. I would get up in the morning, sometimes stumble down the hallway, sit down at my desk, be coding or on a conference call within a few minutes. Sometimes I remember to put my pants on, sometimes I wouldn't. But I really felt like I was living the dream. I talked to so many people on a daily basis who lived in other cities who had an hour and a half, 2-hour commute into their workplace that by the time they got to work, they were so stressed out from the commute that they weren't in the right headspace to be able to write code, let alone, engage with other people and be creative and collaborative. And, there's just an increasing number of obstacles to going into an office and an increasing amount of reduction in productivity that we see in office places. So I was really excited for this opportunity, and I started remote working. And right away, my wife and I decided we wanted to move up to the Pacific Northwest. One of the great advantages that you have as a remote employee is that if you want to move somewhere else, as long as your employer is okay with it, your job is not bound to where you live. So we decided we wanted to move up to the Pacific Northwest. We looked at Seattle, we looked at Portland. We have family that lived in the Tri-Cities, and when we came up here and visited this area, we decided that we really liked it, and this is the place that we wanted to be. So we moved up to the Tri-Cities. Let me back up here. Yeah, September 2012, packed all our boxes, all our belongings into boxes, put them in the back of a moving truck, and shipped them across the country, 2,000 plus miles from Oklahoma all the way to Tri-Cities. Found our dream house, got moved in, and I was remote working. Unfortunately, within a month of arriving, I got a call really early in the morning from my boss, which was a little bit odd. My boss usually didn't call me, and if he did call me, it usually wasn't in the morning. And he said, "Hey, Justin, I'm sorry to have to tell you this. I know you just moved, but the position that you're in with the contract that you've been working on has been canceled. And so that means that your waiver that you had that allowed you to remote work is no longer valid. We would love to keep you on as an employee, but we don't have any remote working positions available. We need you to move to an office. Either there's some positions in Seattle. We actually have several in San Francisco that are a really good match for your skill set." And so, my wife and I talked about it, and we decided, you know what? We just moved here. We have our dream house. We really like the area. And you know what? We don't want to move to San Francisco. Great city. I love visiting it. Just didn't want to live there. And so I declined that job offer and said, you know what? I'm going to find something here locally. And so I did what all of us do when we're in a similar situation. Started looking around, finding out all the local businesses, sending out applications, adjusting my resume, writing cover letters. And the sound of silence from all those job applications was kind of deafening. And I really started to get worried. I was thinking, what did I do? I uprooted my family, went away from all my coworkers where I had an established professional network to a place where I know nobody except a couple family members, spent all my savings, spent all our family savings, on a down payment for a house, and it's looking like we might have to move back to Oklahoma and live with my parents for a while. Fortunately, that didn't happen. What did happen is I went back to my roots and thought about this problem as an engineer would. What do you do if there's something that you desperately need that you can't buy and doesn't really exist that you don't have access to? You build it, right? So I said, okay, what do I really need? I need a professional network to leverage to get a job. Okay, so I'm in an area where I know nobody. I have no professional contacts except a couple members of family. I don't know any of the businesses, don't have inlines to any of those organizations. How do I build a professional network? And the answer is the same way you build a professional network for remote working, one person at a time. So I went back to LinkedIn, and this time I wasn't looking for jobs. I was looking for somebody who worked at one of the organizations I had applied to, who worked in the local area. Somebody maybe in management, maybe middle management, so that they actually respond if I sent them a message. And so that maybe they'd understand what my resume meant and what my background was. And I found somebody. And that guy, I wrote a message to him, introduced myself, attached my resume, said, hey, I applied for this job. If you think I'd be a good match, I'd love to meet up with you and talk about it. Within a day or two, I had a response back. And within a week or two, a job interview, and ended up getting a job at that organization. John, if you're out there, thanks. I want to say that that same situation that I went through is kind of what it's like when you first move into remote working, because you have to build a network up from the ground. But before we talk about the before we talk about the how, I'd like to talk about the why. So to talk about the why, I have an example here, and it's called the iron triangle. The most well-known iron triangle is the iron triangle of product development. The idea is that you have a triangle with 3 corners or 3 vertices, and on each vertice is a different aspect of developing a product. You can see we have the options cheap, fast, or good. Unfortunately, you only get to pick 2 of these, right? So we all know how this works when you see products out there. If it's something that's cheap and it was made very quickly and came to market quickly, they chose cheap and fast, chances are the product isn't particularly good. If you choose to make a product that's good and try to bring it to market quickly, chances are it's not very cheap, it's probably relatively expensive. The iron triangle locks you into choosing 2 dimensions while foregoing the third. So I'd like to propose the iron triangle of employment. On the 3 vertices of the iron triangle of employment are where you live, where you work, specifically the company you're employed with if you are an employee, and then third, what you do for work. Now, a lot of us set our career track very early on. Things like where we go to college, what we study, what kind of books we read are based off what our interests are. If we want to become a writer or an artist or an engineer or whatever your specific choice is. So generally what you do is the earliest decision you make, and you lock in that vertex at a very young age. Sometimes we start over and change career tracks and change that, but generally when you do that, you're starting over again at the bottom of the ladder. So you're really left with 2 choices, and we consider ourselves lucky if we can even get 2 of these aspects, with one of those being what you do for work, right? So typically, if you choose what you do for work, which we all do, your choice then is to stay in the local community where you are, or a city that you choose. That is to say, you choose where you live. Say you choose to live where you grew up, where you have family, where you have friends, where you have professional connections, where you feel comfortable and where you're happy. Well, then you may be limited to a very small list of employers in your local area that are in your particular industry. Or you go the opposite path and you say, you know what, I know that I'm going to have to move to New York, or I know that I'm going to have to move to LA, or I'm in software and I know I'm going to have to move to San Francisco, but I want to choose where I work. So if you choose where you work, you have to take the leap of moving across the country potentially, away from all your friends, from all your family, from your networks that you've already built, just for the purpose of taking that particular job. If you're married or have a significant other or family, it affects all of them as well. And so this iron triangle affects our lifestyles in a very fundamental way. It binds us to particular places or makes us forego our human connections for pursuing a specific job. The promise of remote employment is that with remote employment on the table, we can break this iron triangle. You can actually have all three of these dimensions. You can do something like choose to be in software and choose to live in Tri-Cities and work for a company like Google or Facebook or any of those really big companies out there that maybe you're interested in. And this isn't just for the tech industry as well. I meet people who are in accounting, who are in law, who are in all sorts of different disciplines that can support this sort of remote working. So that's the advantage to an employee. Why are employers finally coming around, even though the technology has been here for a while, for this way of thinking? And the answer to that question is that there's a number of benefits to employers as well. So if you think about San Francisco, again, apparently my favorite example, San Francisco has a very broken job market in some particular places. Software is one. There's an increasingly large number of tech companies that need extremely technical people with very specific skill sets, and there's just not enough of those people to go around. So the salaries get higher and higher and higher for lower and lower quality individuals who happen to be in the local area. So what that means is that a lot of these companies, especially startups, are struggling to find the talent that they need to enable their businesses to succeed. And they're finally getting to the breaking point where they're saying, you know what? What if instead of making somebody relocate to San Francisco, we just opened it up and anybody could apply anywhere, and we're going to consider it more important to evaluate our employees based off the work that you actually do rather than where you are physically located. It's more important that you do your job and do it well than that you're in a specific location warming a chair for 8 hours a day between these specific hours. That's really what's important to us. Once companies come to that realization, they find even additional benefits on top of that. Benefits such as offices. You know how expensive it is to buy 20,000 square feet of office space in downtown San Francisco? Not very cheap. And once you buy that office space, you have to fill it with computers, with printers, with coffee makers. Since this is the San Francisco job market, you a great big yellow twirly slide that goes all the way down around. Probably some pinball machines, maybe a little mini arcade. Otherwise, who's going to want to work there? I mean, come on. But they don't have to buy all those things, and their employees are immediately productive. They don't have to go through a commute where they get to work and they're super stressed out and know that they're going to have to go through it in another couple hours. They're not worrying about what they're going to do about picking up their son or their daughter or having a sick loved one that they have to worry about caring for. And their productivity, the amount of work that they actually do for those companies, is higher. And we realize anymore that the benefits to the employers are as significant as they are to the employees as well. So that's the why. How about the how? The first thing you need to do to land a remote work is see if it's possible where you already work. That means ask. If you're at an employer and in a situation where you could possibly remote work, maybe just for 1 day a week, go up to your boss, go up to the human resources department, say, hey, would it be a possibility for me to remote work? I'm interested in this. I hear it's becoming a thing. I think I could be extremely productive doing this, and see what they say. I've even seen people who are moving out of a specific area because a spouse has landed another job somewhere else that really like the company that they're working at, and you would be surprised when they go to their employer and say, hey, we're moving out of town. I really love working for you guys, and I would love to stay on. Would it possibly work out for me to be a remote employee? You'd be surprised how often they say yes to keep really good employees. Companies are really willing to do that to keep their talent. Next, research. Go out and find in your industry if there are companies that are already doing this, that support remote working, that have remote employees. Find out about them, see how it works. Find other employees who work at those companies, find those people and network with them. right? So if you find these people, reach out to them, ask them, go see if they have a personal blog. If they have a blog, read their blog posts. If you read a really interesting blog post, actually send an email to that person, ask them, insightful commentary, talk about whatever the topic was, ask them how they got into remote working if they're remote workers, and ask them if they have any advice for you. Build your network by going to community events, things like TED, things like all the different professional conferences in your specific industry, and build a network, not just on a local level, but on a state level, a national level, even an international level. And lastly, the informational interview. This is kind of one of those secret tips that really help you get into remote working. If there's a company that you like, call them up and ask them if you could possibly have an informational interview. Say you want to understand more about their company. They would be, in most situations, very happy to share that information with you. And if you end up applying for a job, this greatly increases the chances that you'll end up landing that position. So in summary, I think remote working is going to change the way that all of us are productive for the companies we work for, the way we stay connected with our communities and families. And I hope to see all of you out there online remote working with me. Thank you.